Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders are primed to go early in the draft, but will they be good fantasy quarterbacks in the NFL? We discussed the fantasy outlook for the top quarterbacks in the 2025 draft class on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL, fantasy, and betting for sportingnews.com. Look at our coverage of the 2025 NFL Draft. Can't believe it's almost here, Michelle, but we're going to do some more draft talk on today's show.
Yeah, we're less than 2 weeks away, and we're going to get into the top quarterbacks in the 2025 draft class. We've already hit on the top running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends, so it is time today to talk about the quarterbacks. Before we get into that, I want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Armada Player of the Week later in the show. Let's jump in to these quarterbacks. And it seems like the very clear-cut top guy that's going to go in this draft class is Cam Ward. For a second there after the college season, there was a toss-up. Will it be Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward? And now it definitely seems like the Titans are very much considering or going to take him with the number one overall pick. Now, I will say this draft class doesn't offer a ton of exciting options for fantasy, but you never know. Like these guys could be very relevant as soon as next year, especially if they get a shot in a good system. So with Cam Ward, let's go over his skill set a little bit. 6'1.5" feet tall, 219 pounds. He has a very quick release, good anticipation, willing to take risks with the ball, which is nice. So like he'll throw deep. He's not worried about that. Now, sometimes he plays too much hero ball that can get him in trouble. But for fantasy, we're all right with that, right? Like throw those deep balls. The big issue with the top two guys in this class, and Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, is that they don't offer you a ton of rushing upside. But at least with Ward, he is a very capable scrambler. Like he can have a 300, maybe even 400 rush yard season in the NFL. That wouldn't shock me. He's just not the guy that's going to get you 600 plus. So, Vinny, where would you like to see, like, do you expect the Titans to take him? And if they do, what are your expectations for him in fantasy next year and throughout his NFL career?
Yeah, with the Titans, they also have some fond memories of Steve McNair, and he kind of does a lot of the things that Steve McNair does in terms of not going to run and be a dominant runner there, but can move to extend plays and is going to make some clutch plays while on the run and can throw on the run. So that's always good because you can extend plays and do things there, and he can take off and go if things break down. But he's also really good at doing that, throwing downfield outside of the pocket, which is very appealing for a lot of teams right now as they move the point of release for a lot of these quarterbacks. So I do like the prospect quite a bit here, and he's grown on me as we've gone through the process. He's actually had really good pre-draft process all the way through Miami's pro day. Now, looking at his fit with the Titans, I think, look, this Titans team really tried to reboot the offense last year. They've actually worked on the offensive line before that with some of the moves they've made up front. And then you look, their weapons have been okay. I think they could still use an upgrade there and what they're doing. And I think if you get a quarterback here, if you're the Titans, you would consider like a Jaden Higgins or somebody like that in the second round to pair with Ward because they don't really have that. I mean, Calvin Ridley, we'll see. You know, he's not the guy that can consistently get open, and he's a bit inconsistent in general as a receiver. So let us figure out how that plays out. But you do have some good concepts. You have an offensive-minded coach in Brian Callahan. So I think it's not a bad landing spot. The part I'm having trouble with is knowing how exactly what his impact is going to be. Now, when you look at Ward or Sanders, they are popped up. They're behind in the Sam Darnold range, I like to say. Late is among the QBs on the board. So way outside of even QB2 top 24 range. They're more 28, 32. So the question is, can you get Cam Ward to finish about 10 to 15 spots higher than that? That's going to be difficult, right? Because we don't know exactly what this Titans offense really should look like because we've only had Will Levis and Mason Rudolph execute it a little bit. So we don't really know what they really want to do, because it's kind of blended what the Bengals did, blended what the Jaguars did with Trevor Lawrence. So it's a little bit of everything, a hybrid offense that we're looking at. They do have a pretty good back in Tony Pollard, so that always helps to take pressure off the quarterback. Now we'll see how much they want to throw downfield, but to me, to really get that impact, you got to trust some of these players a little bit more. Like, is Ridley going to come through? Are they going to get some more weapons? Is Chiga Conquo really someone who can boost a quarterback? So I think there's a lot to be done here. I do like the schematic fit, and I do like the player. It's more, does he have enough around him the way that Jaden Daniels did last year? Or are we looking at a Caleb Williams situation where things don't quite work out around him and therefore hurting his initial fantasy value? We had to go wait till 26 before he's a real factor.
Yeah, and I think that's the case with him if he goes to the Titans, because they definitely, if they could add a good wide receiver there at the top of the second round, then cool, right? If that player hits, that's awesome. It could be like the T. Higgins for Joe Burrow when they drafted them both, and then maybe they can grab, the elite guy next year, even further than that. But Calvin Ridley and Treylon Burks and Van Jefferson, that's just not enough for a rookie quarterback to really thrive as a fantasy asset, especially when we're going to have to count so much on his passing touchdowns because he's not going to get you those ton of yards. But I mean, we did see Bo Nix go into an offense that we thought was lacking weapons, and Bo Nix did just fine. And he had that scrambling upside like Cam Ward has, where it's not going to be huge, but it offers enough. And they have built up their offensive line, like you said. We'll have to see how it all comes together, but they spent draft capital the last couple of drafts on offensive linemen and Peter Skoronski and JC Latham. So hopefully they keep developing. And then they added Dan Moore to left tackle this year. I don't like Dan Moore, but they spent a lot of money on him, so they think he's good. And then Kevin Zeitler, who's getting older and has some injury concerns, but still a good right guard when he's healthy. So they have added pieces there to protect Cam Ward at least. Now, let's say the Titans don't go. They don't want to take a quarterback, right? They decide, let's just move back. Maybe a team offers them a really good offer to move up to number one. Would you rather him go to maybe the Browns or the Giants or the Jets, or do you think the Titans are the best option for his fantasy success in the NFL?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind the Giants at all. I don't think that's a bad landing spot because you have Malik Neighbors built in there. I think I feel a lot better about Malik Wilson right now than Malik Neighbors than a Garrett Wilson. I'm mashing them up, but I would feel better because we've seen Neighbors have the big season that we haven't seen totally put together from Wilson yet. I think you look at Ward, however, I mean, the scheme might be a little bit better for him in New York with the Giants than it would be with the Jets. So it's a tough call here. I do think the Titans are trying, as Michelle said. They've been working, hacking away at their offensive line. They spent some money on free agents last year, trying to assemble some weapons. They haven't quite all come together the way they would like, and that would be big. And especially, I mean, look, they took a first-round pick on Treylon Burks right after they traded A.J. Brown. So it's not like they weren't trying there either, but things have just not panned out. Burks just cannot stay healthy. He's got some issues. So I think they definitely need to take a receiver. Maybe you need to look at one of the tight ends in this class a little bit later as well, because Okonkwo, we've been talking about him a lot, and he's been limited, right? He's not doing a lot. So I think you look at the other places that are a little bit more established in terms of the weaponry. But again, I think Cam Ward is a sleeper that we're looking at in the back, but we still need to see more. It's a little bit incomplete with the puzzle here in Tennessee.
What's nice is if he goes to Tennessee, he's an instant week one starter. Like, I cannot imagine Will Levis winning that job, or Cleveland, right? But if he goes to the Giants, I do think that's the best spot for him for his career in 2026 for fantasy. But, they're going to give Russell Wilson the shot and maybe even Jameis Winston before Cam Ward gets in there. Now, if he got a chance to actually play and he gets Malik Neighbors and Brian Daboll's offense, then it becomes a lot more exciting for him. But you'd have to be a lot more patient if he lands with the Giants. We're going to move on to the next prospect. And he's really difficult, too, because he could go number 2 overall in Shedeur Sanders, or he could drop all the way to maybe even 21 to the Steelers. Like, he has a wide range of outcomes of where he can go in this draft and how teams feel about him and his personality and all that. But I do think he has a good arm and can be good in the league. So we will discuss Shedeur Sanders in great detail right after a quick break.
All right, as Michelle told you at the top of the show, this episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. It's time to reveal the Armada Player of the Week. Of course, Our friends at Nissan were focused on the draft, and one player that stands apart, the guy who has a showcase of strength and power and agility to take any team forward and our fantasy teams higher next season. Well, this week's Armada and Clear Cut Player of the Week is Tyler Warren. Now, if you missed our show yesterday, we broke down Tyler Warren's skill set. He's right now borderline starting fantasy tight end, and we're excited about that. And look, he can have an impact wherever he goes. He lines up everywhere, makes plays. He's a lot like Brock Bowers from last year, just his go-to guy from a top college offense. And he's pretty strong as well. He's not just an athlete who's going to get open as a receiver. He can get in there, mix it up a little bit. He's got some of that George Kittle toughness there, and he's just going to be confident in doing whatever he needs. And that's what you're going to get from the Nissan Armada as well. And look, he's dreaming big, and you can go big as well with the Nissan Armada. I mean, you just want something to go through everyone and push through and be versatile and dependable for you. Tyler Warren was that at Penn State, and he will be that in the NFL and for your fantasy team. So go check it out. I think you'll see Tyler Warren, much like the Nissan Armada, go forth and conquer going forward. It's clear that he's ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can do in the Nissan Armada or any of the outstanding vehicles that Nissan has to offer. Take the Rogue or Pathfinder as well. Go find your next big adventure. Just shop nissanusa.com. All right, so check out that show if you missed it on the tight ends. We talked about the other positions as well, including Ashton Genty at running back and Tedero McMillan at wide receiver. Now it's time to get into our second consensus quarterback prospect of the draft, and it's Shedeur Sanders. He's still there. There's a lot of knocks, and where is he going to land? Is he going to fall to the top 10? Is he going to go late in the top 10 to the Jets or Saints? We don't know. There's a lot of speculation. The Browns, as we're doing this, just signed Joe Flacco back. So what does that mean? We don't know. They have Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett as their quarterback. Do they mean they need a pocket passer that they want to groom and Flacco is going to teach him? Or are they set? We don't know. But we do know, look, Shedeur Sanders is a very strong, accurate pocket passer. And as Michelle pointed out in the previous segment, he's a pocket passer. We're not going to just assume he can run. Look, he's an athlete. We know that. You have to be somewhat athletic to play quarterback, but he is not a runner. The production is not saying he's a runner. He's a pocket passer. So, with that in mind, Michelle, what kind of pocket passing upside does he have? And look, it's worked out. I mean, Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff, these guys have been great fantasy assets. What do you see from Shedeur Sanders?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to come down to his attitude, right? I feel like that's what's keeping some teams worried about him. Is kind of the attitude he's giving throughout this process, or whatever. Like, do they feel like he can have a good head on his shoulders in the NFL, be a good leader? Now, all of his teammates in Colorado say he was a great leader, right? So that's what we have to go off of, his actual teammates who play with him. And he is a very accurate thrower. He can lead guys really well to get those yards after catch, which is huge. That's like the Brock Purdy mold, right? And he's very, very good under pressure. He had a ton of pressure at Colorado. Now, a big part of his, I guess, negatives is that he can hold on to the ball way too long. So will it end up being like a Caleb Williams where you're like, just throw the ball, and he's getting sacked so many times? Or was it just guys weren't getting open enough for him in Colorado? Who knows? But he is also a very, very clutch player at the end of games. Like, there's a lot of things to like about Shedeur Sanders. And if he lands in a spot where he can have a good coach, like, I do think the Steelers would be the best landing spot for him. Now,
Yeah.
I don't think he actually falls all the way to the 20s. So maybe the Steelers would have to move up, but we know Mike Tomlin can deal with a little bit of diva personalities, right? He's done it for his whole head coaching career, and he's very, very good at it. And then he would have DK Metcalf and George Pickens to target. I would love that landing spot for him. I would prefer, I think the best thing for his career would be for him to fall a bit in the draft and not get taken by a bad team like the Jets or the Browns, or even I think the Giants would be an okay landing spot, but like actually falling to a much more stable organization, I think would be great for Sanders.
Yeah, and it could really work out in his favor in relation to Ward. I mean, maybe the Titans need another year to put together. I thought they did some good things last year, but I think it really depends on how far along that team is that takes Sanders and how are they going to incorporate him into the offense. Now, when you look at the Jets, and we're just trying to read some of these quarterback rooms, right? You have Justin Fields, so he's a running quarterback. So it'd be a big contrast to have both of these guys in the room, and maybe not the best personality combo in terms of two guys fighting for a spot. So you look there. Then Giants, look, it's a little bit appealing because you have a combination of two guys that are kind of rah-rah, and Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. Did they bring him along as a mentor? Are they good influences on him? And we know, however, that's not great for this year. I mean, when you have those two veterans in your room, it's going to be hard for Sanders to get on the field right away. So those two spots don't look all that appealing. The Browns, again, they are a mess right now. And now they have Flacco. So I don't know if it's a guarantee that Sanders is going to be the starter in day one. I would think so in the situation if they take him at number two. Now, the team that actually is the odds on favorite for him all of a sudden are the Saints. And that's really an interesting landing spot for me because you do get Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore's going to have to get used to not having Jalen Hurts, who can run and do all those things and have things go in his favor. But he did also work with Dakota Prescott and
Dakota.
Rain Dakota, and his other guy, Justin Herbert. So he worked with both of these pocket passers. So it's not like he's doing it with just the running quarterback. He's a very good, versatile quarterbacks coach, and partly because it comes from the fact that he was a quarterback himself, very successful at Boise State, and a good backup there. So he's actually a great quarterback mentor, I think. I think he'd kind of balance out the flash of Shedeur. We know Kellen Moore is more understated and he's going to go in there and get with him. So look, it's not the worst when you think about it with the Saints because they have a new system. You have Jawan Johnson, good tight end as a security blanket. Chris Olave could work out. You have Rashid Shaheed. If he can come back healthy, he can get him downfield and deep. So this might be bold, but if Sanders lands with the Saints, he's way more appealing to me in fantasy than I would say Cam Ward with the Titans because I know Shedeur is going to start with the Saints. They're going to displace Derek Carr right away, and we're going to see it. So I think that's why I'm excited about that landing spot. These others, not so much, don't want any part of him. But in this landing spot in particular, I think he could have a very good spot to excel sooner rather than later.
I agree. Now it just would come down to what do they do with Derek Carr? Like, would they figure out a way to trade him, or would it be a competition? Like, I don't see that happening, right? I
No,
don't
he's
see him
gone.
over.
I mean,
Yeah, Derek Carr would have to be traded in that scenario. And if that's the case, then yes, the Saints and the Steelers would be the top two landing spots
right,
for him.
easily.
But yeah, very easily, and we'd get excited. But would you rather him with the Steelers or the Saints? Which one would get you more excited for fantasy?
Yeah, I think I a little bit know the direction of the Saints, and let's be honest, we look at Kellen Moore versus Arthur Smith. We're going to feel a little bit better about Kellen Moore. I mean, his track record is a little bit better. He just won the Super Bowl with a lot of guys, where Arthur Smith just disappointed us with Atlanta over and over again. So I think that would be the difference. Now, would I say the weapons in Pittsburgh are better? Yeah. When you look at DK Metcalf and George Pickens, and you throw Pat Fryermuth into the mix, absolutely better. And you look at, however, the other support system. One thing I forgot to mention: New Orleans, Alvin Kamara. You got a guy that can check down, make some plays, as well take pressure. Well, Steelers are still figuring that out, right? Who's going to be the running back? So there's more uncertainties and variables with the Steelers than they are, surprisingly, with the Saints. I can't believe I'm saying that, but it's true. So again, we're going to watch Shedeur Sanders to the Saints very carefully, I think, in this draft, because again, if he is there, then I think he's a draftable quarterback in fantasy.
Yeah, it definitely will become very, very interesting if that's where he lands. We have two more quarterbacks to discuss. Now, your guy will most definitely be the third quarterback taken in the NFL draft, but I have a different favorite third
Mm-hmm.
quarterback for fantasy. Maybe not for next year, but for his
Mm-hmm.
NFL career. We'll get into those last two guys to finish up today's show right after a quick break. All right, I want to thank you all again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Let's finish up today's show with our last couple quarterbacks that we are looking at for fantasy in the 2025 draft class. Vinny, who is your third favorite quarterback in this class?
Yeah, I guess we're all following the chalk here. I hate to say it, but there really is not a lot of a mystery here that Jaxson Dart might be the third guy taken in the first round. We don't know how high. He has a wide range of outcomes, fantasy buzz phrase. But when you look at it, the Steelers are in play a lot for Jaxson Dart because we want to assume that Cam Ward will go number one, and then Shedeur Sanders will go well before that 21 spot. Somebody's going to take him. So that's why Jaxson Dart has been attached a lot to the Steelers if they would pull the trigger to go and get that type of quarterback early. Now, we will mention that Michelle's guy and a couple other options are there if they wanted a table quarterback in the first round. So there's that. But let's look at Jaxson Dart, the prospect. Is interesting, right? He's like a mix of different guys. I think he's a kind of two prospects in one. Some people have actually likened his running ability and his strength and the things he can do there, and he'll be willing to take off and run. This is a guy that will give you some numbers there when needed. It's a little bit like Jalen Hurts in terms of the strength and how he runs and he carries himself. So maybe he can also pull off the tush push if it's still legal and give you some points there. But he's kind of again, basically two different prospects. He's a pretty good runner in that aspect when he's focused on that. And then he can also throw deep and looks very comfortable with his arm strength and just very, I don't want to say cocky, but borderline just very confident and physically and mentally tough quarterback. So not a lot is going to phase him. If he throws an interception, he's going to come out there and he could throw a long touchdown right after, right? He's not going to let it go down. He's not going to melt down from that. And I think we saw a little bit of that. And the Steelers, if they go that, they need to have a mentally tough guy. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger was tough as nails. Kenny Pickett, I think, couldn't handle that as much. So I think that's the biggest thing. That's why he's appealing to the Steelers. Now, when you look at Dart, I mean, if he's a starting quarterback, and if he goes to Pittsburgh, he's a starting quarterback with some dual threat capabilities. He's going to be right on the radar. And again, you mentioned how you much like the Steelers as a landing spot for Shedeur. Well, if Dart is there, then we might have to put him in a spot as well to like him maybe over Cam Ward. I mean, if he's the starter from day one, he does have that running ability and the cheat code potential. So I do like Jaxson Dart. I think he can make some big plays. I would love to see his arm be showcased with George Pickens and DK Metcalf. So I think it'd be close. If he was in Pittsburgh and we had Shedeur in New Orleans, I would be like, this is pretty close that these guys are both appealing. And I'll just say this. Like, people are going to say, oh, go get Geno Smith with the Raiders or Sam Darnold with the Seahawks. I'm not going to go there. I want to get some upside here. I know what those guys can do, and it's capped as they change teams. But I'd be more excited about these rookies if they're bona fide starters with decent weapons, and Dart included if he lands in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean, whatever quarterback lands in Pittsburgh, if it's not Aaron Rodgers, right? This is the thing. It's like the whole Aaron Rodgers thing is still dooming over this franchise. It
Yeah.
still looks like he's probably going to land there. So I guess we won't know until after the draft. Likely, maybe they're waiting to see if they can land one of these prospects in the draft, or maybe they won't go with Rodgers at all. Who really knows what they're going with there? But whoever does land there, I mean, and gets to start, they have nice weapons to deal with. And Arthur Smith's offense can be okay. We've seen it before. And Mike Tomlin is a good coach, and it's just a stable organization. So it's a good landing spot for whoever goes there. Now, my guy, like Jaxson Dart, definitely does offer more mobility and rushing upside than Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. Absolutely. But my guy offers even more than that. It's Jalen Milroe. And I don't necessarily think he's going to be like a day one starter. That's not really the case, right? But I do think he might have the most upside in this draft class. And he reminds me so much, and I swear I'm not helmet scouting, of Jalen Hurts, right? They had very similar numbers at Alabama. They have a very, very similar build, 6'1" each. Milroe's a little bit taller with 7/8 of an inch on Hurts. And then basically the same weight near 220 pounds. And they just give you so much rushing upside. Now, both of them coming out of school, raw passers, right? Jalen Milroe is not the most accurate passer. There's a lot of things he needs to work on. He needs to work on his footwork. He needs to work on, just like his processing skills and all of that. But He's an amazing athlete, the best one of the notable quarterback prospects in this class. He has very good arm strength. He averaged 37 yards on his 16 passing touchdowns this past year. And then obviously he's going to take off and run and get you a ton of rushing yards. He had 20 rushing touchdowns as well this past year at Alabama. That was 8th in the FBS, let alone not even talking about just quarterbacks, just 8th in the FBS. That broke Jalen Hurts' Alabama school record for a single season rush touchdown by a quarterback. Hurts had 13 in 2016, and Milroe put up 20 rushing touchdowns. Milroe led the SEC with 71 offensive touchdowns over the last 2 seasons, and that was 6th most in the FBS during that span. When he gets an opportunity, and I do think he needs to learn a bit, just like Jalen Hurts did, and he can get into a good, good organization that will give him the shot. I do think for fantasy, he's going to be really, really good because of that mobility and the rushing upside.
Yeah, we'll see where he ends up, and part of that is just having great receivers who are able to stretch the field at Alabama. And look, every other athlete in 2025 is named Jalen, so we're just all wanting to talk about Jalen. So maybe you're Jalen scouting and not helmet scouting. But when you look at it, look, a certain team is going to go with someone they're comfortable with, a style of quarterback, and that would say that translates to the NFL as well. Now, I have right now Jalen Milroe being a very solid option for the Jets. Now, I see all these things where the Jets might be looking at Shedeur and these other options early. But I look at Justin Fields. Why wouldn't you want to have a competition between Fields and Milroe? I mean, they're very similar skill sets. You wouldn't have to do a lot different in what you're calling. And if you're going to use his legs in the NFL, and you should, like, I don't like these teams that try to contain these quarterbacks anymore. Like the Commanders didn't do it. They let Jaden do what he wanted to do, and you saw the results. Like, don't contain these guys. The Eagles have done that well with the OG Hurts. Like, just fine, right? I mean, just let him be what he is and build on some of the weaknesses and try to get those contained, right? Where look, you have to live with some of the stuff. Like if he can be a dynamic runner and get some big games that way, and he's going to make some big plays with his arm, you live with maybe okay, we're not going to get the short to intermediate stuff. So what I'm worried about a little bit is I don't want him to become Anthony Richardson, where he's just dependent on his legs or deep ball, and if things break down, and that's it. There's nothing else in between, right? I don't think he's that way because I think he's a little bit more polished. Keep in mind, I mean, Anthony Richardson came into the league very raw, and that's why he was drafted. But I think Milroe is very polished, much the way Hurts was going through 2 programs. So I do like Milroe quite a bit. I think you might actually see Quinn Ewers in some cases drafted over him. It really just depends on the system the team runs. If they're comfortable with him just getting loose as a runner, I think they would draft him ahead, and that makes him appealing for fantasy. Like he is the number 1 cheat code quarterback in this draft. So you're absolutely right about that, Michelle. So I'm excited to see where he lands. Again, it might be 2026, but look, that's how it played out for Hurts, right? He's got a little cup of coffee his rookie year, started rolling with it, and he's been a fantasy stud since. So you're really right in that comparison. It's not about the helmet or the name or the school, any of that stuff. I think it's a legitimate physical comparison because, again, Alabama knows what they're doing and trying to get quarterbacks, and they even got extra ones, right? So they got 2 other guys drafted in the same room. So I do think Milroe, you have to pay attention, and I'm excited about what he can do.
Yeah, I think definitely in dynasty fantasy football
Yeah, I love
drafts,
it.
he should be a guy that you're
Him and Dart, yeah.
definitely paying attention to. And again, yeah, it stinks that maybe it's going to be like that red shirt year and you got to be patient. But I do think once he gets his shot, he will be very good for fantasy. That will be it for today's show and the shows this week. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great weekend, everybody. We will talk to you on Monday. Bye, y'all.